Guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel many times before. This must be the 30th or so review that I've done from this brewery now, and I've had some very good beers from them over the years. So for this one then we are going to head up towards Gothenburg once again. Göteborg, as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast. Got to get that catchphrase in of course when we're doing Gothenburg beers because it is a bit of a channel tradition. And for this one, we are going to head out to the east of the city to Landvetter once again. And Landvetter is, of course, home to the wonderful Bryggeri. So the beer that we're going to have a look at today is called The North. It comes in at 6.5% ABV, and this one is the latest instalment from the Bite series, which is their series of West Coast IPAs. So yeah, this one I think should be really quite interesting. This beer was released as part of the Lokal Småskaligt assortment for January of 2021. And it was released along with the South as well, actually, which you'll see me review in a couple of videos' time. So basically the idea between these two beers is that this one contains Northern Hemisphere hops and the South contains Southern Hemisphere hops. So yeah, both West Coast IPAs, both 6.5% ABV, and I'm certainly looking forward to trying these beers. But yeah, these are not the first beers that I've had from the Bite series. The first two that we had were called the Woods and the Tropics, if I remember rightly, and those were released maybe back in like October or something like that, and those were the first beers that were released through Systembolaget from the Bite series of West Coast IPAs. But yeah, definitely curious to see how this one turns out. The hops in this are, you know, pretty old school and pretty nice in my experience, so hopefully it turns out to be a nice beer, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on it as well. Always nice to try new things from Dugges, of course, and so yeah, let's go for it. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Bryggeri before, and you will definitely see more added to that list in the fairly near future. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the home page and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to quite a lot just now because I am, you know, living in Sweden. There's lots of Swedish beers available, so that's just kind of by the by. But as always, do please get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit about Bryggeri. So anyway, as I've mentioned to you already, Bryggeri are based in Landvetter on the outskirts of Gothenburg, Göteborg on the west coast of Sweden, and the brewery was established back in 2005 in Mölndal to the south of the city by Mikael Engström Duge, whom of course it takes its name from. But a few years prior to this, Mikael had met an Englishman who was selling second-hand breweries, and this really got him thinking about brewing his own beer. So he studied the kind of admittedly complex Swedish alcohol laws. They were even more complex back in those days. I think they have been relaxed quite a little bit, but he visited various breweries around the country and started buying up equipment to put together his own brewery, and this culminated with the opening of the first facility in Mölndal back in 2005, as I mentioned earlier. Over the coming years they continued to grow this brewery, but by 2009 they'd really just outgrown this original premises, and so the following year in 2010 they moved out to Landvetter. So the older brewery had a capacity of about 1,500 hectolitres of beer per year, but the new brewery started with a capacity of 8,000 hectolitres, and this has been more than doubled in recent years. And over the years this brewery has become really well known for quite a number of different things. In the early days they were known mainly for their kind of fruity and sour beers as well as the big imperial stouts, but more recently they've been investing a lot in barrel aging and producing quite a few high alcohol beers, you know, barley wines and even more imperial stouts and stuff like this. But I would say that probably the most notable beers from these guys in recent times have been the IPAs. They've got various different IPA series these days. This one, the Bite West Coast IPA series. They've got the Crush and the Fresh as well, which are different New England IPA series. And then they've got the Future series as well, which is their whole barrel aging program. So yeah, a very, very prolific brewery, these guys, and probably the best beers that I've had from them, in my opinion, would probably be the Key and the Sidamo Dim 2. Those were beautiful coffee stouts, and Dugas Bryggeri are the one that I will always credit with having gotten me into the whole coffee stout style, actually. So yeah, if you ever get the chance to try a Dugas coffee stout, I highly recommend that you do. And in fairness, their New England IPAs recently have been very, very good, actually. They thickened up the mouthfeel a little bit, and I think they go together very, very nicely. But yeah, as I say, the West Coast IPAs are a little bit newer on the scene in my experience, and the last ones that we had were quite good, but they didn't feel quite as refined in some ways as the New England ones that you'll find from Dugas did. So I wonder how these two will actually turn out. But so, as I said earlier, fingers crossed for a good beer, but for the moment that's all I can really tell you about Dugas Bryggeri, other than the fact that these guys are one of the co-owners of the two Brewers beer bars in Gothenburg, along with All In Brewing and the guys from Electric Nurse. Electric Nurse is of course run by Mikael's daughter Ida, along with her husband John. But yeah, as I say, if you want to learn more about Dugas Bryggeri, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all of those different beers that they've done. So yeah, let's get on and have a little look at this beer then. I'm really curious to see how this one turns out. So as you can see, the artwork is pretty typical of what you'd expect from Dugas, and the artwork of course is very similar to the South, as you'll see a little bit later. Plain gold bottle cap. I really do wish they would get black bottle caps and just write Dugas on them. I think that would be a really nice touch, but they never seem to do that. I'm not sure why. Maybe a little bit expensive or something, but in fairness, they are a big brewery. But yeah, who knows? Could be environmental reasons as well, you never know. But it says on the side here, this is the North. We welcome you to the Northern Hemisphere with this Bite Series West Coast style IPA. Hopped with Columbus, Cascade, Amarillo and Citra hops, it has an aroma and taste experience of walking in a North American pine forest, picking orange juice from the trees and enjoying every drop. Borealis. So yeah, pretty nice. As I would say, Bite Series IPA, 6.5% ABV, 330 millilitres, as you can see. But yeah, really nicely presented. As you can see, it says Aurora Borealis. So yeah, not sure what that's all about actually. But yeah, the hops in this one, as we know, Aurora incidentally is, am I remembering rightly that Aurora is a Slovenian hop? I think it is. But yeah, Columbus, as we know, is quite a popular bittering hop, lovely big kind of spicy characters to it. Cascade is the classic Yakima Valley hop, about 8% alpha acid, bit of grapefruit, bit of kind of figgy qualities from what I remember. Amarillo, about 12% alpha acid, you know, big oily orangey notes, and then Citra is another kind of classic. Amarillo and Citra were two of the kind of classic high alpha acid hops, along with Simcoe. Those would be the three originals, I would say. Maybe Centennial you could include in that as well. But Citra, about 14% alpha acid. Mangoes, you know, a little bit of gooseberry sometimes, lychee, and some lemon limey notes depending on what's in the malt base. But yeah, this one, 330 millilitre bottle, as I said, released as part of the Lokala Småskaligt assortment on the 4th of January 2021 through Systembolaget here in Sweden. This one I believe cost me about 35 Swedish kroners, roughly about £3, €3.50, and I guess maybe $4 American, I guess, to translate that into the different currencies. So yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. I think this should be pretty nice actually. 6.5% West Coast IPA. I'll tell you something, you can smell some of these lovely big hoppy notes out of it already. Yeah, sugar the rest of it up, and there we go. Yes, I'm curious to see how this series evolves from Dugas actually, because I'd been saying for a long time that I wanted to see some West Coasters from them, and it is nice to see the West Coasters coming back into the fold a little bit. Everything's all been about the haze in recent times, but now the West Coasters are starting to make a little bit of a comeback, which is really nice. So I'm hoping that this one has a good little bit of bitterness to it, like the classic West Coasters. Many of them these days are lower bitterness West Coasters. But yeah, this one looks very nice. As you can see, this beer is poured with just a little bit over a half finger of a frothy, I would say perfect white head. That's going to fade away and be a very thin foamy layer. If we put the light through this beer, you can actually see that there's quite a few little sediment particles floating around in it. The main reason for that is that, as I've said in the other reviews of my January low callus Muscovades. I'm not drinking this one as fresh as I normally would because unfortunately I got delayed in my comeback to Sweden. But yeah, there are quite a few little tiny bits of particulate matter floating around in this one. One or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there. I mean, overall it looks nice. And in terms of colour, I would describe this one as a nice kind of bright yellow colour. So I don't think there'll be too many different types of malt in this one. Maybe a little bit of carapils, a little bit of pale malt, maybe a bit of golden promise, something like that. I wish they would I'd love that if Dugas did that, because I've had so many beers from Dugas over the years. I'd love to know what these guys are using in their malt bases. But yeah, lovely kind of bright, rich yellow colour. But overall, nothing overly surprising about this beer in terms of its appearance. You will find ones that are a little bit more kind of amber than this, but yeah, I think it should be pretty nice actually. So let's have a closer look at the aroma and see how we get on. Yeah, pretty old school smell I have to say on this one. Yeah, so straight away with this beer you can smell some nice kind of bready backbone to it. It comes across as quite bread crusty, I think, to be honest with you. So yeah, get a good little bit of white bread out of it, maybe a little touch of a kind of wholemeal sort of bread crusty kind of thing as well. On top of that, you do get some of the sweetness that you would expect of the West Coast IPA. Some of that, of course, comes from the alcohol. Some of it comes from, you know, brown sugar orientated malts, you know, carapils, biscuit malts, you know, caramuni, sometimes straight up caramel. You know, in America they would use the crystal or the two-row malts usually to do this. Maris Otter in England is another one that works quite well in these beers. But yeah, for this one, as I say, kind of basically a backbone of a kind of white bread, kind of fresh white bread, a little bit of a kind of wholemealy bread crusty kind of thing in there as well. Some nice, you do get a little bit of straight up caramel in this one, but I think there is a good little bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive. There is a good little bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive sort of presence to it. So yeah, I like how this, I do like how this goes together. I mean, it does come across as a kind of classic West Coaster, to be honest with you. And you can smell it does have a wee bit of the dankness that you'd expect too, but we'll move on to the hops in a second. Like I say, it's quite a straight shooting malt base for a West Coaster in my opinion. I'm curious to see. It's got a bit of wheat in it as well, I was wondering, yeah, because there was a little bit of that. So yeah, you can pick up just a little bit of that wheaty bitiness in there, but it's quite minimal. Sometimes, as I say, some breweries these days are putting a bit of oat in the West Coast IPAs, but from what I remember, West Coasters never really used to have that, but wheat in the West Coast IPAs wasn't uncommon actually. And in fairness, yeah, if you take the aroma in with this one quite deeply, you can get a little bit of the bitiness of the wheat, but yeah, the aroma on the malty side is pretty nice. So yeah, let's focus on the hoppy side of the beer then. So you do get a wee bit of earthiness out of this one, but there's a nice big green component to this one. Of course, with these West Coasters, you do expect, you know, a big kind of resinous, kind of sort of spicy, floral aromatic note out of these beers. Chinook, of course, would be the one that would give you the kind of deeper pine resins. Columbus is the one that's going to give you the more kind of spicy floral character, and it's the latter that we've actually got in this beer. So yeah, the you know, it is quite a, yeah, it's really quite spicy note that you get out of this one, in honesty. I mean, yeah, it's a big kind of floral aromatic spicy sort of thing. It's the Columbus that's giving you the main backbone here. The other hops will be contributing to it, of course. And remember, when it comes to the bitterness in these beers, it's all about when you actually add the hops during the boil. If you add the hops earlier on in the wort, during the wort boil, that's when you're going to get more bitterness out of them. And if you know, as you gradually go through the wort boil, usually for an IPA like this it will be between 70 and 90 minutes. But if you put them in at the start, that's when you're going to get basically all bitterness from the hops. And as you're going to gradually go through the time, you're going to get a trade-off between bitterness and then flavour and aroma profile. So this one will have quite a bit of early addition hops. That's tradition with these kind of West Coaster IPAs. But yeah, you've got a nice little bit of a kind of grassy component there as well, but the main green component in this beer is the main green component in the beer is the kind of big floral aromaticity. So yeah, a little bit of lighter grass in there, good little bit of floral aromaticity, like I said, and slightly spicy, but there's a nice big oily fruity character to this one. So for me, on the fruity side of things. You do get a little bit of that juicier kind of mango sitting in behind. You can pick up a little bit of like a more pungent grapefruit, passion fruit sort of thing. But I would actually say that the Amarillo is the one that's taken centre stage here. I find this beer really oily and orangey. So right up my street, to be honest. You guys, if you've watched the channel for any length of time, will know that I love a really good West Coast orangey leaning IPA. So I've got a good feeling about this one, I have to say. So yeah, lovely big kind of oily orangey notes there. It comes across quite bright actually. Amarillo I always remember being really, really oily, and then Mosaic is a bit brighter and tangerine juicy if you like. But yeah, the Amarillo in this one has a good little bit of zest to it, which I don't remember seeing in Amarillo. But in fairness, it's been a long time since I've had an Amarillo-centric beer. I think the last one would have been the 100 Amarillo from OO Brewing, but that was in New England rather than the West Coast. And remember, hops can behave differently depending on what's in the malt base. But yeah, for me, good little bit of mango from the... definitely a good little bit of mango from the Citra coming out in this one. A little bit of that slightly stronger passion fruit, good oily orange in there, and then you've got a wee bit, you can smell a little bit of the Cascade in there contributing to the green side of it, and also a little bit, you do get a little bit of a kind of almost figgy type quality from Cascade as well, and I'm sure we'll see that in the flavour of the beer. But take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of this one before you get stuck in. I think this is going to be pretty good actually, so let's go for it. This one is the North West Coast IPA at 6.5% ABV, part of the Bite series from Dugas Bryggeri in Landvetter, just outside of Gothenburg on the Swedish west coast. Let's get stuck in. Slanje, skål, cheers. Yeah, that's pretty solid actually. I like how that comes together. I will say this one comes across as being just a little bit more refined than the other two before this did. And you know, that is the thing, is those two beers that they put out before, the Woods and the Tropics, those were the first ones that they'd released in this Bite series, and you know, it's going to get better and better the more that you that they do these beers. Obviously they're going to improve all the time with them. I don't know if they'd ever brewed, they probably will have brewed a West Coast IPA at some point, but they've got a, I think the brewer that they have, I forget her name, but she came from the 5 Points Brewery in London. I think, you know, she seems to be really pretty talented from what I gather. So, I mean, they're going to improve all the time with these beers actually. So, yeah, I look forward to seeing what this series produces. But I will say that these two are an improvement, I think. Or, well, this one at least, it seems to be an improvement on the other two. This one just comes across as that little bit more refined, and again, they'll probably take baby steps with these beers until they find a recipe that they like. It was the same with the New Englands, definitely. But yeah, for me they've got a really nice mouthfeel in this as well. It's got that nice kind of oiliness that you would want from this style, and it does actually come across as it's got a good bit of that kind of old school type vibe to it as well, which you want. So thumbs up to Dugas for this. I think this is a solid beer. Is it the most exciting and crazy thing you're going to find from Dugas? I wouldn't say so. You know, I wouldn't say that. But is it solidly done? Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, you know, it'll maybe take a few more kind of brews, if you like, with these West Coasters to kind of get ones that are really going to wow you. But in terms of you know, this being a solid example of the style, it is absolutely that. And you know, maybe that's just it these days. You know, sometimes the West Coast IPA is a little bit more of an old school style these days, I guess we could say. I still love it, but you know, maybe in my mindset I'm thinking, right, you know, these are kind of like you know, like when I have a Pilsner beer, I think, right, I want it to be really authentic. That's maybe the thing the kind of mindset I have when I try the West Coast IPAs. So, you know, I need to think about these a little bit, to be honest with you. It's a bit of a, there's two sides to the coin, I guess we could say. But yeah, it is a really nicely executed beer, this one, so big thumbs up to Dugas for this. So yeah, let's break down the flavour of this one then. So I mean, straight away with this beer, you get that nice kind of smooth bready backbone there, just blanket in the middle of your tongue. You can feel the wheat playing a role in there as well, right enough. But yeah, in the middle third of your palate, you've got a nice kind of white bready quality there. You can feel as you go towards the back of that front third of your tongue, there's a bit more of that kind of bread crusty quality to it, which I like as well. You can feel a little bit of that. On that border region between middle third and back third, you start to get a more kind of grainy quality to the beer. But then in that back third of your tongue, you can feel that sort of wholemeal bready sort of thing sits underneath. But on top of that, you start to get the more kind of wheaty side of the beer coming out. And that's definitely an interesting point about this beer for sure. The wheatiness that you get out of this is pretty damn solid again. But yeah, I do like how this beer goes about its business. Absolutely, I think it's the malty backbone of this beer and the bready backbone that it has is pretty solid. And I'm curious to see whether the malt base in the south is different to this. I don't know why I picked this one first over the south, to be honest with you. I think it was the beer I reviewed before this was had some. I think all the ones I reviewed were actually American hops. I just thought, you know, kind of carry on with the Northern Hemisphere stuff. But yeah, it's nice, as I say. So yeah, let's go to the back of the palate and work our way forward. So yeah, a little bit of bitiness from the wheat at the very back, and as you move further forward, it smoothens out a little bit. When you reach that kind of border region between middle third and back third, you can feel the thickness just drop away a little bit. Then as you move into that middle third of your palate, you can feel in the middle of your tongue there's a little bit of a sweet kind of caramelly sort of thing comes out, and then as you move out towards the edges of your palate there's just a little bit of a kind of biscuity sort of thing in there. As I said, there's nothing surprising about this beer, it's just well executed. As I say, that's what makes me think about the kind of Pilsners and the German style beers and stuff like this. So that's really what I'm getting out of this beer, and I think other than that there's not too much to say about the malt base in this one. It's pretty, you know, straight shooting, which I like. I do like that. But yeah, let's focus on the hoppy side of the beer then. So the back corners of the palate, you do get a nice little bit. You get a nice little touch of earthiness out of it. As you move further forward, there's a wee bit of a kind of herbal thing going on. But then quite quickly, as you move towards the kind of front corners of the palate and the big kind of sides of the tongue, you've got a nice little bit of floral aromaticity out of the beer. As I say, it gets a little bit spicy the further you go into the aftertaste, although I don't find this beer to be overly bitter. I think that, you know, it's nowhere near the kind of 80 IBUs and stuff I think that you would normally get from these West Coast IPAs. I think this one might be sitting a little bit less than that. Well, the thing I'm conscious of as well is that I'm drinking this beer a little bit older than I would normally, so maybe some of the bitterness has dropped out a little bit. It certainly gets more bitter the further you go into the aftertaste, that's in no doubt, but as you go round the front curve of the palate, the beer's got a little bit of a lighter kind of grassy thing to it as well, but you can definitely feel a little bit of the spice from the Columbus in this one, and I think the grassiness is coming from the I think the grassiness is coming a little bit more from the Cascade, to be honest with you. You can feel some of the fruity elements of the Cascade the further you go into the aftertaste. So yeah, that's another interesting point about this one. But yeah, in terms of the fruity part of the beer then, front third of your palate, you've got that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So let's focus on that then. Underneath you do get a little bit of a kind of white bready note there, you do get that kind of forming the backbone. Then you've got a little bit of graininess on that border region between front and middle third of your palate, so a wee bit of that coming out there. But yeah, as you move further forward, you get all these different things. So at the very back of that front third of your tongue, there's a wee bit of a kind of passion fruity, grapefruity sort of thing. There's definitely a bit of that there. Then as you move further forward, you've got a nice little bit of a juicy kind of mango quality to it. And that's the Citra kind of coming out there. The Citra will give you a little bit of that stronger tropical fruit note, but the Cascade will also contribute to that as well. But then yeah, as you move kind of further forward with this one, on the front half of that front third of your tongue, that's where you get the really big kind of oily Amarillo notes coming out of the beer. And yeah, for me that's kind of what it's like. The beer, it's actually, in the aroma it came across as being really orangey orientated, but I'd say that in the flavour it's a bit more balanced than that. You do get a good balance between the tropical and the kind of more citrusy side of the beer. So yeah, the front half of that front third of your tongue is all about those big oily oranges. But as you go into the aftertaste, you will get a little bit, there is maybe a wee tiny touch of like a limey note coming out of this one, and you know, Citra's got a lot of complexities to it, and I would say that Citra is probably contributing to that too. But the thing you will notice about this beer is that the further you go into the aftertaste, you get a few of these very slightly, I hesitate to say figs, but it's just, the Cascade is so distinctive. It's got just a little touch of an almost red fruity thing that comes off of it the further you go into the aftertaste. So yeah, that's what I get out of this beer for sure. I do get that big kind of very slightly red fruity kind of thing, so yeah. But yeah, I think the fruity side of this one for me, it's got a little bit of wetness to it, but a little bit of oiliness, but it is pretty old school. You know, it's a pretty old school West Coast IPA, this one. So yeah, it gets a thumbs up from me. I like these kind of beers. It's a little bit of nostalgia factor, you know, but like I said, for me, it strikes me as just being really, it's a solidly done West Coast IPA, this one. It doesn't do anything crazy with the style, but I think it's just absolutely solid. So yeah, very, very nicely done. But yeah, awesome stuff from Dugas. I think maybe they're getting into the groove with these West Coast IPAs for sure. But yeah, in terms of the mouthfeel then, I mean, top end to mid-bodied for me, it's kind of sitting around there. You know, carbonation's very, very smooth. Mouthfeel overall, I'd say a mix between wet and oily. In terms of bitterness, I think we're talking, I think these are about 60 IBUs, 50 or 60 IBUs, but remember, this is the weakest point of my beer reviewing, is picking up the bitterness of these beers. Sometimes they'll turn out to be a lot higher than I think they are and things, but I would say that this beer is probably about a 60 IBU beer, something like that. Malt base, like I say, has got a good level of sweetness to it and a bit of smoothness in there, and the fruits have got a nice kind of mix between wetness and juiciness and honesty. So yeah, big thumbs up to Dugas Brewery for how this beer goes together. Actually, it gets a big thumbs up from me. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. I think this is a really just solidly done West Coast IPA, and on the basis of this one, I certainly look forward to trying the South. I'll be curious to see if there's any more differences to it other than the hops. But yeah, this one, properly old school West Coast IPA, and that's what we want. 6.5%, very nice and drinkable. And yeah, it's got that kind of, overall I would say it leans towards the bready kind of side of the spectrum, such as the, you know, more like the kind of Pliny the Elder side of things rather than the more kind of caramelly end of the spectrum like the Sierra Nevada Torpedo. But yeah, both sides of that spectrum are very good. But yeah, let's leave it there. This one was the Northern Hemisphere hopped West Coast IPA, coming in at 6.5% ABV from Dugas Brewery in Gothenburg, or Landvetter, near Gothenburg on the west coast of Sweden. You'll see the South coming up very, very soon, but I hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you for watching my reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below, and I will catch you guys in the next review. Slàinte, skål, cheers, make sure you check out this beer and have a go at some of the Dugas stuff as well if you get the chance.